to GCSE Product Design, Design Influences, topic number 16, Economics of Manufacturing. Sounds complicated, but it is actually quite simple. Okay, this video will help to introduce it.
The world is full of things. All kinds of things. We don't necessarily need them all, but they're here anyway. And the thing these things have in common? They've all been made by somebody. But how are they made? Factories come in all shapes and sizes. The types of production, broadly, fall into three categories. Job, or one-off production, could be a musical instrument, a hot air balloon, or even the mighty Three Gorges Dam in China. Then there's batch production. That's for sets of things, and then changing to do other sets of things. And thirdly, continuous flow. For when you want to make lots and lots of the same thing non-stop. The categories seem straightforward, except that in the real world, it isn't quite that simple. There are all kinds of variations on these three basic categories, as we shall see.
Okay, so in other words, scales of production is just another way of thinking about how many products you're going to make. In other words, are you going to be making one product, are you going to be making some, or are you going to be making lots of the product? Okay, so there are three types of production system you saw in the video. There are one-off or job production, batch production, and flow production, or sometimes continuous production. So let's look at each in turn. So one-off production is all about making a single product. Some of the characteristics of one-off production: it would use a small specialist company, highly skilled workers, and they would produce a super high quality product. And it would very often be made for a small specialist group of people. So examples might be this handcrafted chair, or even certain buildings are considered to be one-off products. Batch production is when you're making several products. Now, you be aware you can have small batches and you can have large batches, but the idea being is that batch production is very flexible. You can change to make different products. So the factories, for example, that are making the iPhone, they're not just making the iPhone, they're making iPads, they're probably making Apple Watches, they're doing the different types of iPhones, and you'd find they can do that because they have a range of semi-skilled and unskilled workers. And they often make use of bringing in components from other companies. So, for example, again in the iPhone, that particular company, Foxconn, don't make every component. There'll be screens from Samsung. I think the camera's made by LG, and these components are bought in. Another example, cars are a good example of batch production, and washing machines. Okay, so most of the products that you come into contact with will be batch production. Mass or continuous production is all about making lots and lots of products. Very often it would use an automated production line, so very few people, lots and lots of machinery. Any people that did work there would probably be very unskilled, maybe a few semi-skilled workers to help run the machines. And these machines would run 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And here are some examples of products made from mass or continuous production. Your loaves would be made using batch production.
Some 1,300 years ago.
Not need to watch the whole video. Okay, and buttons, water, zips, nuts, bolts. You saw at the start of the video things like toothpaste. These are basically factories that are set up to just make the same thing over and over again and to produce it. Okay. Now, a typical question, this is one of those sort of comparison type questions at the end of it, is try and explain how modern production methods have influenced the design of the modern loaf. So to help you, I'm just going to go back a page and just show you that video.
Some 1,300 years ago, in the time of King Tut, Egyptians were already baking 40 varieties of leavened bread. The Greeks' contribution to this history was the oven, and 70 varieties of flavored breads. Breads so good that the Romans took the Greek bakers to Rome and their ovens to Gaul. This is how, by the Middle Ages, bread had become the primary food of Western Europe. Multigrain bread is made from several ingredients, such as flaxseed, buckwheat, soya, and millet. This protective grill prevents foreign matter from accidentally falling into the recipe mix, a recipe calling for some 600 kilos of flour. The ingredients, ground in a mill, are kept in these 36 enormous containers. We begin by mixing the ingredients together. These kneading troughs are used to ferment the yeast, a step which takes 3 hours. The fermenting yeast makes the dough rise considerably. This huge mixer kneads the dough for about 8 minutes. When thoroughly homogeneous, the content is emptied into a large tub. The dough weighs 1,000 kilos. That's almost a ton. The dough is loaded onto a slide situated above the dough divider. At the bottom of the machine, a small hole allows the dough to escape. 2 mechanically operated arms cut the dough pieces into equal lengths. It forms 192 of these a minute. The dough then falls onto a conveyor. Here, dough pieces are rolled into balls, which can be more easily worked. The dough balls are floured to prevent them from sticking during their transport and when they're molded. Here the balls of dough leave the divider and go to the molder. During transport, the dough can rest, allowing the yeast to act. The dough is then folded and rolled. The machine can handle 3 per second for a total of 11,500 an hour. The dough is rolled out to the exact size and falls into baking molds. Here we see the making of hot dog rolls. These little dough balls have to be shaped lengthwise and fermented before molding. Here the hot dog rolls are being machine molded. Dough pieces must not touch one another, so they're spaced apart by a small mechanical arm. Now we go back to multi-grain bread production. Squatted down at the bottom of the molds, the dough pieces go into the prover, where they rise for an hour at 42 degrees centigrade and at 70% humidity. Then they bake for 20 minutes at 255 degrees. When finally baked, the loaves end up with a nice golden color. A vacuum system draws the loaves from their molds. They're then placed on a conveyor to cool. A guidance system takes care of carrying the breads to various sections of the bakery. When well cooled, breads go to the slicer, which cuts 65 loaves a minute. They are sliced by 2 meter wide and 40 centimeter long steel saw blades. These blades are changed every 2 weeks. Sliced loaves are automatically packed at 65 per minute. They're now ready for shipping. Some 5.5 hours have passed between preparation of the dry flour and packaging of the baked bread.
Okay, so the question asks you to explain how modern production methods, which you've just seen, how have they influenced the design of the modern loaf? All right, because obviously loaves used to look like that, but now they look like that. Based on what you saw in that video, you know, how have those methods influenced the design? In other words, why do loaves now look like this? Okay, so think back to the shape and some of the machinery that we used. All right. And then in your question booklets, you've got another one there that's asking about why companies choose to mass produce products. So if you go back to looking at batch production, obviously you're going to be thinking about things in terms of low cost, speed of production. It's very, very fast. It also, you get quite low labor costs because you're using these sort of unskilled workers. All right, so plenty of advice there to tackle those. And that is the last of the design influences topic. Thank you. And don't forget, like and subscribe this video and the DT YouTube channel. Bye.